Excuse me, but do you have Worldbuilders disease? Is your setting a Mary Sue world? World building is a big process. We're literally creating a world, after all. And there are some common pitfalls that I've seen again and again. In fact, I've literally got a list of the known culprits. And most importantly, I'm sharing solutions, tips and tricks to tackle these world building mistakes if you spot them in your own RPG campaign or novel setting. But just before we kick off, I fully acknowledge that mistakes is a YouTube word. And sometimes with world building, it's not easy to tell if something is a bug or a feature. So if it's your first time here, then hi, I'm Janet. I'm a professional world building consultant and a published author, and I try to help people with their world building. However, I am not your mother. I don't live in your computer. And I'm not the world building police. I'm just here to help. So if you're experiencing any of the things in my list and you're enjoying them, or it's working for you, then lean in, my friends. Keep doing what's working and let me know in the comments. But be nice. World building mistake number 1 is mosaic world building. So let's start with the definition. It's when your world building feels unconnected and disparate, like each area is its own self-contained zone. A classic example of this is the old school MMORPGs or computer games, where each zone is its own closed sphere. There's no trade, influence, or overlap between different places in your world. The players or main characters can travel between areas, but it seems like nothing else can. No weapons, products, culture, or even other people. This can be a big problem for storytelling because it ruins suspension of disbelief. It makes your campaign or novel setting feel fake, like a construct, and anything that pulls your players or readers out of the story is a bad thing. One good way to tackle mosaic world building is to focus on things which span regions and even countries. Stuff like organized religions, cultures, diasporas, spy networks, or guilds. These can help your world feel more connected, simply by having the same religion pop up in different places. You can add a local twist to blend the flavor to your local area with the wider themes of your world. But the simplest fix for mosaic world building is simply remembering to add elements from outside the area in each location. Things like foreign citizens, imported goods, stories, legends, and rumors. Ports and trade cities are great places to weave in the influence of other lands to make your setting feel more connected. It's quick to do, and it also informs your players and readers about other places in your world. If you have a World Anvil world, go and check through the map and see what you can weave together. World building mistake number 2 is Worldbuilders Disease. So what is Worldbuilders Disease? Well, it's the compulsion to keep building your setting in increasing detail, more detail than you need or even is useful for you. And my classic example is elven shoes. Let's say elves are an important part of your world building. So you detail a little about the clothes that they wear and their shoes. Maybe if it's important to your plot, you'll add more detail. For example, a villain can be spotted because they're wearing the wrong kind of shoes, like combat boots to a ball. Great job. Your world building is still serving your story. But if you find yourself getting overexcited and accidentally writing a 50-page treatise about the history of elven shoes over the last 7 centuries, and it's not directly relevant to your campaign or novel, then honey, you've got Worldbuilders Disease. Of course, you may be asking yourself, is Worldbuilders Disease even really a problem? After all, if you're having fun, isn't that enough? Well, that depends. Are you world building to put off writing your novel or finishing your campaign prep? Because Worldbuilders Disease, this compulsive, unhelpful kind of world building, makes it very hard to finish your setting preparation and get started on things, to start your campaign, keep writing your novel, or whatever you're world building for. So what do you do if you've been diagnosed with Worldbuilders Disease? There are several ways to combat this world building mistake. First of all, you can limit your word count. Writing in bullet points, like in the agile world building method, is a really good way to do that. You can also use timed writing sprints. For example, give yourself 25 minutes to detail elvish clothing and not 1 second more. Next, focus points are really important for world building a setting, and they can help you with Worldbuilders Disease too. After all, they literally help you focus. In World Anvil's meta, there's a special section which helps you define the important things in your world building, and I have a whole lesson on focus points in my How to Start World Building course too. So figure out your focus points, and if in doubt, stick to them. That way you know that what you're world building is important. And remember, world building is an iterative process, so you can always come back and develop more of your world later. Don't let the FOMO get you. World building mistake number 3 is world building cultural monoliths. Are all your elves snooty? Do all your dwarves love mining and drinking beer? Basically, do all your characters from a culture have identical opinions, religion, sexual orientation, hobbies, and tastes? If so, you've built a cultural monolith. I love me a good monolith. These are bad monoliths. But don't worry, it's easy to fix. Understanding culture as a monolith is a problem as old as time. Our brains are pattern recognition machines, and those squishy meat walnuts like to create consistency and see commonality. We focus on what people have in common. But as a writer, that can lead to oversimplification in your world setting. There may be common trends in your culture. For example, most people believe in a religion, there's a common cultural hobby, or certain prevalent opinions. But that doesn't mean that everyone in the culture thinks the same. A fun example of this done right is Varric Tethras in Dragon Age. He's a smart-ass dwarf who doesn't have a beard, he's more interested in writing detective novels than mining, I can relate, and in general, he's the opposite of a stereotypical fantasy dwarf. Introducing variety like this will help you make your characters stand out as individuals, and it makes them more memorable and fun too. But more than that, it'll create cultures and people who feel more real and more relatable. And we all know the feeling of being different, so it'll help your audience connect with your different characters too. World building mistake number 4 is Tone Whiplash. For weeks, your characters have been trudging through a foul, dark forest, ducking demon death spiders, and running from wraiths.
And then suddenly they wander into the glen of rainbow elves, making mead from globies, and they're riding on unicorns.
Congratulations, you've just given us Tone Whiplash. Tone whiplash is where you jolt your players or readers very suddenly between moods. That doesn't mean you can't have variation in tone in world building, and it doesn't mean you can't have humour in dark settings, but very discordant juxtaposition of tone can really break the tension of a story, and it'll make your audience suspicious. It's a problem the opposite way round too. If your world is a bright, cheerful tea in fairyland kind of place, and suddenly becomes a violent bloodbath of chainsaw murder clowns, then you'll lose all the readers who enjoy fairyland and tea, and your murder clown lovers won't make it to the bit they'll enjoy. Basically, you'll turn off both sets of readers, and you won't be serving anyone. And even if people stick around, a Tone Whiplash event sets up very clear expectations for your audience. It telegraphs something is suspicious here. Most people will immediately assume that those unicorn rainbow elves are hiding a dark secret. And if they're not, it's going to fail to fulfill audience expectations. If you're subverting those on purpose, then that's fine. But you never want to accidentally set up an expectation that you don't deliver on. That feels like a broken promise. So how do you smooth out Tone Whiplash? Well, try applying some practicalities. The rainbow elves in my example might be protected by wards from the haunted forest, and live in fear that those wards will fall. Or they might be fierce hunters, wearing demon spider teeth as trophies. When you bring the practicalities of two very different settings together, it starts to feel more cohesive and more real. And especially when you're dealing with mood and tone whiplash, a simple aesthetic shift can make all the difference. What if you reskinned your rainbow elves as shadow elves, or even as moss goblins? They perform the same function in the story. It's an oasis in the dangerous forest. But by moving them one step nearer to the tone of the wider area, your demon spider-infested haunted doom forest, you'll smooth out the tone whiplash and make things feel more credible and less suspicious. World building mistake number 5 is Mary Sue Worldbuilding. Can only one story be told in your world? Is it designed exclusively for your main characters to shine? In fact, perhaps it's almost as if the world setting doesn't exist outside of your main characters and their actions. When asked, Dr. Trent Hergenrader, a world-renowned world-building professor, said that this was his #1 world-building mistake. We've nicknamed it Mary Sue Worldbuilding because it's the kind of mistake that can actually create Mary Sue characters by mistake. So perfect, competent, and flawless that they seem like a parody. It's also sometimes called a snow globe world because the whole setting feels fake, like a contained environment for the protagonist, kind of like the world from The Truman Show. Whatever you call it, this world-building problem gets in the way of suspension of disbelief because your world feels flat, like stage pieces, rather than a dynamic living space. And it can also make your world feel boring, as if no one is doing anything or making any decisions except your main character. Now, obviously, no one wants a boring world. So how do we tackle this world building problem? A quick way to patch up Mary Sue Worldbuilding is by adding backgrounds, complexity, and motivations to your characters, side characters or NPCs especially. That's a good way to show that there are other stories, struggles, and narratives beyond those of the main character. Introducing a sidekick or second main character with their own character arc and complementary strengths and weaknesses can also help to break the Mary Sue worldbuilding problem. But a more systemic fix for Mary Sue worldbuilding is by introducing history and current affairs to your world. Basically, making other stuff happen that isn't directly related to your main character. After all, the world should not revolve around them. So why do current affairs help? Well, when there's other things happening in the background, let's say a megacorporation merger or protests against magic users, the world feels much bigger than just your main character. Your characters may never get involved with these things directly, in which case use them as genre and background flavour for your world. A cyberpunk suit here, a disgruntled mage there. On the other hand, your characters might be smart and leverage associated events going on, such as using a protest as a distraction. Either way, it's a good technique for showing that the world is bigger than just the title character. And even better, world-building current affairs gives you more potential stories that you can tell in your world in the future. So, have you spotted any of these world-building mistakes in your own world? Or have you spotted them in other people's settings? Please let me know in the comments, as well as anything else you'd like me to cover in these videos, and please throw us a like. It makes all the difference in the world. All right, lovely beans, now grab your hammer and go world build.